In 2024, Woodinville came out with their 8-year straight bourbon whiskey. And as you can tell from the bottle, it's pretty much gone. This was one of my favorite bottles from last year. It didn't quite make the whiskey of the year, but as you can tell, I drank through it pretty quick. But thankfully, they came out with a 9-year and they came out with an 8-year rye. Just like always, I'm going to pour it, nose it, taste it, talk about it a little bit. I'm going to start with the 9-year bourbon, and then I'm going to move over to the 8-year rye, which is their new releases of 2025. And I want to know is if they hit it out of the park again with the bourbon, and how does the rye compare? So if you like this information and you are not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. If you are interested in supporting the channel, I do have a Patreon account in the description below. You can just click on that link, go through the tiers, take a look at one of the tiers that suits you best. If you feel like supporting the channel, go ahead and select one. All right, so really quick, I got to look at the notes. These are both 100 proof. 100 proof bourbon is a mash bill of 55% corn, 35% rye, and 10% malted barley. I'm going to talk a little bit about how they went about creating this, and I believe the same process was done with the rye. The rye, we're looking at 100% rye, and again, both 100 proof. 750 milliliter bottle. I paid $129.99 for the 9-year bourbon, and same price for the 8-year rye. I tell you what, the 8-year bourbon smelled absolutely fantastic. And comparing it to this one, they're right up the same nosing profile. There's a slight amount of craftiness coming out of the glass, but it's nothing at all that I mind. At all. They remind me a little bit of Frey Ranch. Frey Ranch does come across as a little bit barnyard, but I don't mind that. This is incredibly dark, and when I get to talking about how they went through the process, I think that's going to contribute to the color. Up front, I think it is a good balance of sweet and spice. The sweetness I'm getting is a pretty dark cherry, along with some chocolate, tobacco, and a little bit of leather. I can nose this forever and kind of just pick it apart. It has a typical bourbon notes as well. You can throw in a cream soda or a Dr. Pepper, maybe a little bit of a Snickers bar. The notes that are coming out of here are just really dark, and I really enjoy it quite a bit. So let's go ahead and get it on the palate and tell you what I think. Cheers, everybody. As soon as it hits the palate, there's a lot of Christmas spice here. I think it's oaky, woody, spice forward, hits the mid palate, always sinking underneath the tongue. I mean, it's just making my mouth water like crazy. Chocolate, leather, tobacco, vanilla cream soda, all those dark notes. The cherry note is not as dominant on the palate as it is on the nose. This is just wonderful stuff. I really do like what Woodinville has done. I don't think I've ever had any of their normal releases, just their limited releases. And to me, they've knocked it out of the park. As I'm sitting here on the finish, there's a little bit of a cotton candy bubblegum, strawberry bubblegum note that's kind of rising up. This seems to be very well-rounded. Easy drinker, just exploding with intense notes. There's some complexity here, and just all around on the nose and on the palate, I like this quite a bit. All right, let's go ahead and get a second sip in. See if anything changes. And when I talk about them, I'm just going to talk about both of them and the process together. So let's go ahead and get on to the second sip for this. Nothing has changed from that first to second sip, with the exception of it's a little bit more spice forward. I think this drink's a little bit hotter than the 100 proof, and it is just consistent from the arrival to mid palate to finish. Extremely long finish. Again, dark, rich, deep notes. The concentration of flavors that I'm getting are well above just an average bourbon. And as it sits on the palate, all of those flavors just increase in intensity. As it hits the back of the palate and it starts to fade off into the finish, it's an extremely long finish. And if I haven't mentioned this already, Woodinville is out of Woodinville, Washington. They're a grain to glass distillery, And as I get into the information of this, I need to make sure that I'm getting this right. There's a word in here that I haven't really heard of before. So if you know how they use this instrument, let me know in the comments down below. So both of these, the rye and the bourbon, are going through the same process. Again, Woodinville is a grain to glass distillery, and they're partnering up with Independent Stave. And I just want to read this to make sure that I get it right. The 8, the 9, and the 8-year rye all went through the same process. They're aged in heavily toasted, lightly charred barrels from Independent Stave Company. They're seasoned in open air for 24 months. And then this is where this information kind of gets a little bit sketchy for me because I don't know this process. 4.5 years into the aging process of the 8 or the 9, they used an instrument called a gas chromatography, and I'm not sure exactly how that's being used, but they tested it, and apparently the vanillins or the esters weren't exactly where they wanted it, so they let it go and age another period of time to get to the 8 and to the 9-year-old. And the same thing happened with the rye itself. So that's a little bit of a background between how they ended up getting where they were with both of these. Nosing this again, a tremendous amount of vanilla. The cherry note on the nose, again, is much more dominant on the nose than it is on the palate. I really wish that cherry note would actually come through a little bit more on the palate. So I'm not going to add water to this. I'm just going to go ahead and give it a score and move on to the 8-year rye. Last year's 8-year, I believe I gave it a 4.5. I like last year's slightly better than the 2025, the 9-year. I'm just going to put this to a 4. I really think they did an exceptional job. The concentration of flavors, the depth of flavors are here are really good. I just think that the 8-year nudged it out a little bit more. This seems to be a little bit, I don't want to say sharp because that kind of gives it a negative connotation, but there is a little bit of a not so well-rounded feel on the palate as the 8-year did. So I'm just going to drop that down to a 4. So that is the bourbon. So let's go ahead and move on to the rye. Taking a look at the color, I think the rye is much darker than the bourbon. So as you can tell, I've already had a couple of pours out of these, and each time I've had it, I've liked them. I mean, there's just no way around it. This suits my palate to a T. I think there's a perfect balance of sweet and spice. I would not pick up on a rye with this one. I mean, it's 100% rye, and it smells like the bourbon. It just has a nice overall pleasant, like vanilla, brown sugar, and caramel notes, which I don't think I really ever get out of a rye. It smells like tobacco smoke, like a sweet tobacco smoke. I am not a cigar smoker, a cigarette smoker, or a pipe smoker at all, but I really do like the way cigars smell. And I think this, I mean, if you are a cigar smoker, I think this would pair really well with a cigar. I think it has the same exact kind of crafty note where I do like it. It's not up over the top. Smells like the outside, smells like the earth. And maybe this is a little bit more herbal than the bourbon because I didn't really get any herbal notes out of there. And maybe that's what the rye is actually presenting. I'm not the biggest floral fan as well. And there is herbal and a florality in the glass, but it's not an over-the-top florality. Smells like it's going to be very viscous, smells like it's going to be pretty punchy. Not as well developed and not a whole lot of notes compared to the bourbon. So let's go ahead and get the rye on the palate. All right, cheers, everybody. All right, so there are the rye notes. It's rye spice forward. There's still a pretty good amount of caramel, vanilla, and brown sugar. The florality and that herbaceousness, I guess, is also coming through, but it's not as dominant on the palate as it was on the nose. It was drinking a lot hotter than the 100 proof, just like the 9-year bourbon did. And you get a little bit more of a red candy, red Jolly Rancher note. I'm not getting those chocolate and tobacco or leather notes that I was getting from the bourbon. I'm pretty sure I'm leaning more towards the bourbon. It just has a little bit more complexity to it. But I need to get another sip in. But holy cow, that finish is just lingering on like crazy. That oak note is latching on without being tannin or tannic. I think they have a winner with both of these. So let me go ahead and, oh, holy cow. Okay, there's a lot of red apple coming through now. Just swirling around in the glass, bringing it up to my nose for that second, third, or fourth time. There is a big time red apple. Apple skins, apple juice. All right, let me get it on the palate. More spice, more oak. That red apple note is now really showing through on the palate as well. Second sip, that herbal and florality is really coming through rather strong on that second sip. Red Jolly Rancher, strawberry bubblegum. Yeah, this is really good. I like the notes. I just don't like it as much as the 9-year bourbon. So I'm going to give a score for the rye. I'm going to drop this down below 4. I'm going to say 3.85. It is a little bit drying on the tongue. The longer that it sits, those oak notes dry out my tongue just a little bit more than I would prefer, but overall, a very enjoyable pour. The rye being the same price, $129 as the bourbon, I would gravitate a little bit more towards the bourbon. I don't think there's enough here to separate this away from the bourbon. Let me know in the comments down below if you have had last year's 8-year, this year's 8-year rye, or this year's 9-year bourbon. Always curious on where you guys are from. Do you see these in your area, and how much are you paying for them? All right, that's all I have for you today. Last thing to do is make a little rye blend and see how that goes. Again, if you made it this far, if you're not subscribed to the channel, if you like what I'm doing here, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. Turn that bell notification on. I produce videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And let's get this blend in and see how it goes. Well, I tell you what, certainly brings out those apple notes quite a bit. It doesn't drink as hot as the two of them did individually. I think it flattens out all of the other notes. And really the only thing that comes through on the palate is red apple skins. I think it's a blend that you can probably skip, but if you do have these, maybe try different ratios and see how it goes. All right, if I haven't said it already, wherever you're at in your journey, I hope you're enjoying it, and we'll talk to everybody later. Bye.